Hi, I'm Alejandro from Cinematic Composing, and you probably know me from other videos, or if you belong to the Cinematic Composing community, I'm teacher there. I do weekly chats. I'm also tech coach at Momentum program. Okay, so this is really a quick video compared to others that I have done, but I think that it can be very useful for some of you which are struggling with the computer, not being powerful enough or not having RAM enough to manage all your sample libraries. So the topic is just talking about CPU usage and RAM management of the players, of the plugins that control the samples. So in this case, I'm gonna do it with three of them, the ones that I use more often, which are like Kontakt, Synchron Player, and the one from Spitfire BBC, a symphonic orchestra. So we are going to go one by one and see what each of them can offer in terms of saving CPU, saving RAM, what are the advantages and disadvantages of that. Let's go to Logic, and we're going to start with Kontakt, okay, because it's probably the most used. So if you're thinking of sparing RAM, probably what you want to do is, for example, let me load just a bunch of instruments here. So when you load some instruments there, automatically it will read from your computer what the samples are and load some samples into your RAM. Okay, this is this thing that it says memory here. Okay, in this case, this Marcato is 121 megabytes using my RAM in that amount. But I want to really, and that's important to know, that that's not all the samples that this violin Marcato contains. There's only a portion that Kontakt takes as a just like preload, so that it has some time to give the CPU time to read from the disk. So I want to make clear that these are not the space, the size of all the samples of this violin one Marcato Bison strings, okay? It's only a portion of them. It just buys some time to the CPU to go to the hard disk and read the rest of the samples. Still, how can we modify this? You can go to this range here and go to memory, okay, and well, you have this option of Kontakt memory server. It kind of loads more memory in your RAM, but also you have this instrument preload buffer size override instruments preload size. So this is the thing that I'm more interested in, because here is the connection between CPU and RAM. So by default, from each sample, it's loading here only 60 kilobytes. Okay, so I can go higher and load more of my samples into the RAM. Okay, I'm gonna activate it and you will see what happens now. Okay, now automatically it takes more. Now it's not 121, now it's 178. Why is that happening? Because I said that from each sample, I don't want only to preload 60 kilobytes, but more, like almost 200 kilobytes, or let's go maybe a little bit more than 200. And it will update here. How is this actually working in your computer? It's better for your computer or worse? Okay, I will explain it. The more you raise this, of course, the more samples are gonna load into your RAM. That will offload a little bit the CPU, which means that if you have like a lot of RAM, but a CPU which is like sometimes struggling, it's not a bad idea to preload more samples into the RAM. Will buy more time to the CPU to keep reading samples from the disk where they are stored. In the other way, this would save a lot of RAM. Now it's only 69, but the CPU would have a lot of work because it basically would have to read everything when you play this instrument from the disk. Just mind that if you have a lot of RAM but a low CPU power, you might want to raise this and activate it, of course. And if you don't have so much RAM but your computer is powerful enough, perhaps you can go a little bit below, okay? Another option, if you don't want to overload your RAM, is to use the purge option, which is available here, okay? Where you can purge all samples. And suddenly everything offloads of your RAM, which will save a lot of RAM. This is especially useful for larger templates where if you preload everything in the RAM, your RAM is gonna be full very soon. So sometimes what you want is just like to purge. You can do it individually in this instrument, or you can go here and go global purge all samples, and all go like that. But what happens next time that you want to play one instrument here? It will have to start reading the samples and load them progressively. as you play. So that provokes that if you have many instruments that are purged, when you open a project and the samples are not loaded and you click on play, the CPU will have to read absolutely from every purged instrument all the information and start loading it to the RAM from the disk, loading to the RAM, and then start playing. That can cause problems in the CPU and overloading, okay? The good thing is that it only happens the first time that you do it. So for example, if I play now a C, it will start loading samples there. But when I keep playing the C, it doesn't load anymore because these samples are already loaded. So it's most of the time just the first place to the notes that the computer would struggle, and then later would have more stabilization. Also, regarding CPU, it's important to say that Kontakt, when we load several instruments in one Kontakt, and we, for example, we assign them all to MIDI channel 1 so that we can play it all from the same track instead of making multi-output instrument. Even though we have like multi-core computers, I don't know what's the reason why, but Logic tends to manage one plugin only with one core or one thread of the CPU. Meaning that if you create 5 contacts with each of those instruments, the CPU will spread. One core will manage the marcato, one core will manage the pizzicato, one core will manage the sforzando, etc. But if you put them all in the same one, it will try with one core to manage all the instruments that you are playing here. Okay, in this case, it's all the same instrument, different articulations, but it could combine different instruments like brass here or whatever. And that can be like, of course, more CPU demanding because only one core spikes to the 100%. You're gonna have like some overloading sound, like some grasping, or even like overload system message. Okay, so keep that in mind. The purge and the loading too many instruments in one Kontakt that possibly are gonna play together. I would do it, for example, with the violins if I know that if I play marcato, I'm not playing pizzicato, so it's a good idea. But if I want to put here violins, cellos, violas, basses, and they all have to play at the same time, it will try to do it only with one of the cores or threads of your CPU. Okay? Moving on to Synchron Player, my advice is that you go here to the range and you go to engine, and in engine you can here like define the default preload size. This is the same that in Kontakt. Okay, the more preload size that you load, the more in your RAM, but a little bit less demanding for your CPU. If you don't have a lot of RAM, just try maybe to lower the samples, but the CPU power will be more aggressive. This will be more aggressive on the CPU, okay? Because it will need to read more samples from the disk. Now with SSDs, it's fast. With hard disk, is slow, but still it takes longer than what it takes with the RAM. And then same concept also. For example, if I load here just whatever instrument, just Andromeda, Big Band Orchestra, whatever. Okay, so you have seen that all of them are grayed out. That's because I have same concept. I have enabled like check force disable all slots. So by default, my BNI instruments in Synchron Player, they don't load the samples. But again, it's the same concept. When I play here for the first time, it will not play. It will activate it, like saying like, okay, now I want to play, and play the next one. Okay, just that. Mind that it will happen if you have by default disable all slots. You can also force to enable all slots. So it basically like would enable everything. Okay, you would have everything loaded in your RAM and available every time. Okay, if you click on disable all slots, it will be just now it offloads it. Okay, as you see, like now it doesn't take any from the RAM. And only when you double click or you play, it will start loading. If it's not loaded at the beginning, it will take a little bit more CPU to read the samples until it's loaded finally in the RAM. Another thing that perhaps can help, enable these slots on MIDI activity, because otherwise that's the reason why when I play, it starts loading one slot, because without that, I will have to activate it manually. If I deactivate this, and I play, nothing happens. I would have to manually go and activate it. Okay, and last but not least, we'll go to the Spitfire's BBC Symphonic Orchestra plugin, which it's a little bit more simpler. It's basically you have here all the articulations that you can use, and here it is. It tells you how memory it's using. By default, again, it just loads everything. And here we have the preload size and the stream buffer size, which is the same concept. Okay, you raise it, it's gonna be higher for your RAM. It's gonna take more RAM. You lower it, it's gonna take less RAM, more CPU. If you want to deactivate some sounds though, you can just like delete them from here. Okay, let's say that you only want to use this for long attacks and sustain. So you just want legato, long flautando, and spiccato, staccato, con legno, long marcato, tremolo. Okay, this can stay. I save and voila, it's not anymore 700, it's gonna be 400 now. So now I'm using less RAM without changing the buffer size or whatever. It's just like selecting only the articulations I want to use. This, by the way, is something you can also do in Kontakt. Okay, I'm gonna load another Kontakt with the Spitfire instruments. Okay, if I go and load Albion 1, you will see, even if it's for Kontakt, that you can, if you click in the range, you can offload from the RAM the articulations that you are not interested. For example, let's say I just want to play short attacks and pizzicatos. All the rest can go away. I offload my RAM. It was way more before. Now, if I go like reload all samples or I activate these ones, you will see that it raises. Okay. And the last tip that I want to give you, if in case you have troubles with your computer, like struggling to manage the CPU or it's grasping, it's of course going to Logic Pro preferences, and that works for all that I have explained. It works for every DAW. You go to audio, in devices, you change the buffer size. The higher the buffer size, you will have a little bit more delay at playing or playing from the program, but it will be much lighter for the CPU. So right now, 128, it's something okay. Okay, like if you put it in 32, it's gonna be very demanding for the CPU, but you're not gonna have at least any delay. But with 128, I only have like a latency of 10 milliseconds, which is quite okay. Okay, if you go even like with this or this, it's okay too. This is perhaps you already feel the delay too much, but with this, you wouldn't feel it too much. And it can help to your CPU to be a little bit lighter. Just a little note, when you change this, it will load all your plugins again. That's why it will take some time. And last tip about RAM is other programs, okay? If you have running other programs parallelly to your DAW, it can consume not only CPU, but also tons of RAM. For example, Google Chrome is famous for being fast, but also using around, 300 megabytes for each tab that you have open. So mind that, and perhaps if you are having RAM overloads or your template doesn't fit in the RAM, just try to close everything else. And I hope that all these tips will help you. If you like these tips, just click on like, keep watching cinematic composing videos. Again, this has been Alejandro. So I hope to see you in prospective videos here in this channel of cinematic composing. Bye bye.